Hi, hello. Today we are going to see the topic of walls. We already discussed the materials and also we talked about different types of floors. So today we are going to concentrate in walls. As you know, walls have not been the same for in architecture. In the past, walls were mainly a structural element used to divide or enclose a forms of rooms or a periphery or a boundary of a building. So in old architecture, we had what we call low-bearing walls that will go and enclose the periphery of the building. As it was explained to you before, we have learned with the modern architecture that with the columns and beam structures, we could release the walls in a way that we could have a free facade and open the horizontal windows as much as we want. So we have again this picture, this sketch from Le Corbusier from the 5 points of architecture that I think it translates, let's say, the transition between the low-bearing walls that we were using before and then with the use of the concrete, how we could explore and have, let's say, in the boundary of the building, walls that were no longer a support element for the building. Here you can see that we'll say that normally the walls will support the floors and the roofs. And normally the let's say the best position for it will be like perpendicular to carry the load, but this is not the same when we are talking about different types of shapes, 3D shapes. In the case of the dome, for example, um, they are most easily supported on strain parallel walls. So here we can see a small schematic section where we can see the non-load bearing walls in the middle and then the bearing walls that are in the periphery of the building. Of course, the low-bearing walls, they were thicker around the building, and also because they needed to carry the load of the building, they will become thicker in the bases of the building. Now, nowadays, we don't actually, most of the buildings are not like they don't use low-bearing walls in the exterior. And especially if we see here what we know today as a glass facade or curtain glass, um, this actually, we can see through this picture, we can actually see kind of a cylinders, columns with cylindrical shape inside that are carrying the load of the building. Also, we see the horizontal lines of the slabs, but all around we just see a curtain glass that it's the envelope of the building. It's not supported. All the structural elements are inside, and the envelope no longer it's required for the structural purpose as before. We have here some more examples here in this middle that becomes like a public space, and it's a university from the sides from Dominique Perrault. So the loads now are carried by grinders, beams, and other elements that are called curtain walls. They usually are attached to the frame members. So it's important just for you to understand what is the difference between a low-bearing wall and non-bearing wall, and what are the characteristics of them. Okay, so non-bearing walls, they are free from any limitation of structural requirements. We have here some more examples. Here in the left side with Miss van der Rohe in New York, and then on the right side with Norman Foster in London. So then if we pass on through the interior walls, these are the walls that we normally would call non-bearing walls. So let's say the partitions walls, the ones that divide the spaces inside, that are used to separate activities and rooms, they are called partition walls, and nor they don't carry any weight. That's why you see here actually the first type that we start to talk about, it's the glass partition. They they don't have any supportive, let's say, function. They just divide the space, and sometimes even in this one that's a glass partition, they try to divide maybe from the noise, from the smells, or even sometimes from the looks, or sometimes they even allow you some transparency between different spaces, but without interfering the activities of one to the other one. It's not only like the glass partitions that that we can use in the interior design. You see an office in the left side, and then restaurants and some seats to provide some kind of private, semi-private spaces for some of the tables that are there. Could be one of the strategy that could be used. Also here we can have those partitions made out of wood, and they could also be made out of fiber cement, and usually this is done in kitchens and bathrooms and wet areas because it's very resistant to humidity. We can also have galvanized sheets fixed to the wooden parts. They could be plain or reinforced partition walls, and they could be constructed also in different types of materials like concrete or precast concrete blocks. Then we also could have the metal frame partitions that usually they are kind of supported by tracks. They could be hanged on the ceiling or supported or fixed in the ground, as we can see then after. And then we have one of the most common types of division, especially not only in commercial spaces, offices, and nowadays we do it even in residential buildings like multi-story residential buildings, that it's the drywall or plasterboard or gypsum board. That can divide the spaces, and it's very flexible and easy to maintain or fix if any problem with the with some requirements that pass inside of the walls. So as I explained here, this type of non-bearing walls, the partitions that could be hang or fixed to the ground. Also, this type of fixation and the material that they have will depend on the type of activity, and also, let's say, the level of fire resistance that you need, the acoustic performance, or stops like smells from, let's say, a kitchen to a living area. Now, the most common type of wall, it's the drywall, like I explained, and we have different types of plasterboard. That it's another name. This panel, it's made of gypsum plaster that it's pressed between two thick sheets of paper, and we can use this not only for the walls but also for the ceilings. We have different types, and we have the common one, the regular whiteboard, and that has different thicknesses, and then we have variations of the, let's say, the most common one depending on the spaces that they are going to be used. So the second type, it's the waterproof plasterboard, that it's the green board, and contains an oil-based additive in the green color paper that covers and provides moisture resistance. So usually this it's good to use in areas that are let's say related to water, like bathrooms and kitchens, because they resist to high levels of humidity. At the same time, we have the type X plasterboard, the fire resistant, also with different thicknesses. They have multiple layers of wallboard to try to provide or increase the fire rating base in a specific wall. So depending on the type of protection, fire protection that you need, then also the thickness and the type of layers inside will change. Then we have the blue board, that it's a blue face paper that forms a strong bond with a skin coat, and that it's used, that usually it's required to kind of sustain the water, but at the same time provides protection from mold. So it's resistant to mold. We have the cement board, that is another different type. So it's more water resistant than the green board. So we can use it in showers or sauna rooms, and also many times we can use it in in outdoor balconies for some specific walls or ceilings, depending on the way that then we kind of use the how we use the other materials to kind of make a connection that make it resistant to water from the facade. Then lastly, we have the soundboard that's made from wood fibers that increase the sound transmission class. So as you can see, we have a great type, very large variation of drywall, depending on the type of activities and type of protection that you want to offer in your project. Of course, then we talk about portable partitions, and we have like the low non-bearing walls, but we could also talk about movable partitions, and this is something that can transform the space and a room on architectural design and make spaces a little bit more flexible. This is something that we normally, architects are always discussing, how to give flexibility to a space, how we can transform from one activity to another. So this is actually one thing that you can explore, that we can research to try to change a shape of the room, change the activity that it's there, manipulate the behavior of people. You have here some examples of partitions that can be moved. There are different types of movable partitions that you can use. For example, here you have sliding partitions. You also have the ones that are fixed that work like kind of a screen, like a mashrabiyah. And you also have the folding partitions. So you can extend the space, you can enclose and divide one big space into smaller spaces, or you can even screen with different types of materials, wood, metal, or plywood, from two spaces that can still have some transparency, but you somehow want to provide a little bit more privacy. Then we also have the mirror as a material. I think it's the first time that we are going to talk about this. We have here some examples of how it is used in architecture in a very creative way to kind of convey different conceptual approaches. We have here this example of a shopping mall in Tokyo. That it's kind of it's the way to go in or out, and as you go in or out, the mirror walls and ceiling kind of reflect what is happening indoor or outdoor. So this is in a perspective as you are looking down to the public space. As you can see, it feels like it's kind of merging. So the mirror, it's a good thing that can relate to your concept, and it can reflect the light, also reflect what is happening in a different environment, like this one, indoor, outdoor, or even from one room to another room. There are many different types of mirrors. Here I just talked about the curved or the plane or the magnified one, but we have much more type of mirrors that we can use inside and explore different feelings with people. Now we have a couple more examples of mirrors and how they can be used to create a kind of an illusion of space or amplify a room, because we know that it doubles in terms of perspective. So it can be used, let's say, within another material, like this example that you have on the left from Herzog and Morón and the Art Museum in Spain. It could also be used like in the right side, that it kind of tries to kind of disappear around those trees and became kind of the same as the landscape. But it could also be tainted like the one in the middle, and then kind of provide a different kind of scenario that, even reflecting the environment around, creates a different color. So it kind of emphasizes what is happening, but saying that it's there with a kind of a statement. Another thing that I think also, like the first time, it's the paint wall. So architects, they really like to use colors, and not just coloring a room like all the same color, maybe play with different colors in different walls, or playing with lines, horizontal or vertical lines. There are a lot of different ideas that we can use and the paint for. One important thing that you should know is that there are two different types of paints. There is the water-based paints and the oil-based paints, okay? And they have some advantages. So the water-based paint, the advantages is that they are low in VOCs, they are easy to clean up with water, they are very quick drying, they are elastic, flexible finishing, resistant to cracking, and they kind of stable. The color is stable over time without getting this kind of yellowish color from fading with the time. Now, on the other side, the oil-based paints, the advantage is that it's kind of an attractive glossy finishing. It has like a good leveling because the brush strokes fill themselves and create a smooth finishing, and it's hard and durable. Now we have here independently of the type, we can have different types of finishings. We can have the silky sheens. We can have the matte that could come in matte paint. And normally it's least reflective, the sheen available. It's like a velvety texture, often with great depth of color, but can sometimes be difficult to clean. Then we have the eggshell and satin paint that it's slightly glossier than the eggshell and has some reflectivity. Also offers a little bit more improved durability regarding the matte painting, and it's frequently used in environments like kitchens and bathrooms because it's a little bit easier to clean up because of the high glosses finishing required. And then we have the kind of the one kind of in the middle, that it's a semi-gloss and gloss paint that sorry, not the one in the middle, the one above, that are the most reflective sheens. They are very durable and they can stand up for multiple cleanings. So we can go from the matte to the eggshell and satin paint, and then we can the highest, let's say the most reflective one or the shiniest one is the semi-gloss, or then the gloss paint. We can see here, we are already seeing some pictures on the side. We have here a couple more examples. If you link this with the lecture that we had about colors, about making spaces look, let's say, larger, smaller, longitudinal, perpendicular, shorter, higher, you can kind of play with people's behavior if you understand the colors psychology, and then link it when you are going to make the decision of applying color in your project. And this color, it's not just like the plain color like you see in the right or the left side. It could also be something like in the middle, that it's more like towards already like an artistic feeling. There is a link here that I leave you, that you can see the website Pharaoh Ball. You can go and you can see the trends. They are always changing every year. We have new tendencies and trends in terms of finishings, and also the type of colors that we can use. Now, another kind of aimed product, it's the wallpaper. In It was, for a while, it was kind of left aside, but now, like from some years now, it started to appear again in a kind of retro approach, but also in a kind of a new type of wallpaper that doesn't really relate to the old kind of fashion wallpapers that we had before. Again, because sometimes the conceptual approach that you have, it can really call for and demand for something like the use of a wallpaper in your project. So there are some advantages, because you can add, let's say, it's easy to use because you can add color design. You can kind of mutate, let's say, the atmosphere of a place just by the use of a wallpaper. You can have like a wallpaper that can last for 15 years, but you could also like use the wallpaper and change the kind of your environment more frequently if you don't want to see it for such a long time, especially if we are talking in places like shops that have like a time span a little bit smaller, and they like to kind of, you know, update very regularly so they can attract more buyers. Um, the wallpaper can also add warmth, depth, and style to a room that usually just a monotone paint would not be able to achieve the same. And as you can see here, again, there are some couple of slides just with different examples of wallpaper and how they can be implemented in a room. You can even have wallpapers like the one and down when you see the table, the wood table, that looks like a concrete finish, but it's just a wallpaper, and the one on the right that it's a brick, but again it's a wallpaper. Or you could have something that looks like nature, that is the, let's say, your left side with the trees and the birds and like natural elements, or something that goes like kind of a watercolor in my bedroom, the one on top in the right side. There are more examples here. It could be geometrical shapes, it could be like sketches, it could be, you know, patterns, it could be letters, it could be codes. Here the same thing, it could be a world map, it could be just a wallpaper that I can represent like tiles, or again create in kind of a more artistic way. It's like endless opportunities. We can also have stone wall, and in this case, this alabastro wall that you can actually, because of the thickness of the material, it's walls made of stone, but because they are very thin and they are kind of translucent, when you put like the artificial light in the back of them, they can reflect and can create a completely different scenario for, in this case, like an office space and a restaurant. This is another example of a wall now made of stone and metal at the same time. Here it's granite, it's no longer the same type of material, and the way that they implemented both materials together, like the grid metal boxes with the granite inside, that normally they are used, let's say, in the roads and to support some topography next to highways or heavy traffic roads. Now here, Herzog and Marone kind of try to use a very kind of, let's say, cheap and normal material, common everyday life material, to something a little bit more kind of a luxurious trend. We also have the concrete wall, sorry. There are some examples here of the outside of the facade, but also inside. You can carve, you can create edges, you can play with geometric things, you can do it with curved lines. It's a very flexible material that you can use. If you go back to the materials lecture, you'll see we talked about Niemeyer and the flexibility of shapes and the endless way to produce, let's say, different types of shapes and angles with the concrete. So it's something that it can be mutable and used in many different ways. We also have here a couple of examples of wood wall. In this case, like a kind of a grid, like vertical lamellas that are brought together and creates a kind of a depth and a rhythm in the interior facade. The same thing here, a little bit more in the left side, going towards parametric kind of architecture, where you can see those layers, again, creating benches and walls and providing spaces for the light to come inside, or just the normal wooden partitions with some kind of horizontal patterns or layers. We can also have the tile wall, and that type of wall could be from, let's say, the past, like the blue one that you see here in Casa da Música in Porto from Ram Koolhaas, or it could also be those kind of honeycomb tiles, the very common and very fashion at the moment, the white ones that are here now in a bakery. Another type of wall that it's highly used, it's the metal wall. This one, you have an example of the one on the right that is completely plain, but most of the times how it's used, it's more like and as a frame, as to screen the space. And here, for example, in the left side, it's not only the wall that it's like the using the structure of metallic wall, but also like the ceiling. So it's kind of coming from the wall and then going towards the ceiling with the same kind of idea. They look like, you can see several examples with this metal wall with using different patterns that can kind of relate to an idea of mashrabiyya, let's say, if we think about your cultural approach. Now we have also another type of walls that it's the glass wall. This can be used outside like we have seen before, like the curtain glass walls, but we can also have it indoors, like for divide the spaces like the ones that we've seen in the offices, and here like to provide a small courtyard in the middle of the building that can lead the light to go inside. Also the glass wall, it's not just the plain glass, we can also have like glass kind of bricks, and this can create a nice entrance of light, kind of with a specific layer and pattern that kind of provides a different feeling when you are using the space inside. The other type of walls is the synthetic wall, as we can know now, if we already know like Zaad's work, and we know that if we have 360 degrees, why should we stick to one? We understand that as well as concrete, but to a much higher extent, the synthetic wall can be manipulated and can be created in a very innovative and creative way that doesn't have real boundaries, let's say. So again, depending on your conceptual approach, and if it's more like a futuristic style, you can implement this type of shapes and using the synthetic wall material. Then we can also have the fabrics wall, and the fabrics could be, kind of maybe you can relate it kind of to a old-fashioned thing, but at the same time we have new facades that are put into test that are using fabrics in a very technological way. So again, materials in architecture, technology, it's always like improving and excelling. So we have to keep up the pace, and we always have to try to be updated for the different types of materials and experiences that are being brought by architects, not only companies, and try to know which are the most suitable or which ones we like to experiment. Then we have the green wall. Green walls, we can have it in outdoor area, like the picture on the left, but we can also have like in indoor areas, real life green walls. They can easily transform the feeling of the space inside. And whenever we have any kind of conceptual approach that somehow it's linked to natural features, that it's related to calmness, greenery, it's much, let's say, it's better if we can use real life examples and use greenery than just to use something that it's fake. So again, it's something very common nowadays in indoors and outdoor facades. Now to finish, we know that in walls we normally, at least we have two elements that are very important for us as architects. We have the doors and we have the windows. And those are kind of holes that we carve, that we create on the walls. So the location, the type, the blending, the material, all those things are important for us to understand how do they affect our overall idea of the architecture or the interior design. A door normally allows, it's a connection. It could be the indoor to from one space to another, but also if we think about indoor-outdoor relationship, it's the place where we can actually make the transition between the outer world and then the inner world that we are creating. it's important for us to see that there are different types of doors that can be used, like double, single, sliding, zigzagging, rotating, and also they can be used in different types of materials. We have examples of OSB. We have examples of metal frames. Then we have metal incorporated with glass, zigzag, just pivot doors, sliding. Here are a couple of more examples. It could be even in sliding, you could have different variations. Pocket doors or sliding in front of one of the spaces. They could be also curved, and see how then it's important also the detail of how you control the overall design till the extreme of all the details of the door to be kind of created by you. The windows, it's a connection, it's an opening that usually happens not only in the wall but could also happen on the roof. And like the doors, we could have different types of windows happening. And here there are some examples. They could be fixed or they could be open, they could slide, they could rotate, they could be unring. So there are different types of windows that we can provide. They usually go along with the type of conceptual approach that we have. And also, to some extent, those walls, if we think about shutters, this is another type, it's another layer of wall that it's important that can happen even, in between or in the exterior or inside environment that can create another layer of privacy, or let's say a second skin to a facade. Thank you so much.